Hey, I'm Julian Morgans, and you're listening to Scammerland. Over the last 4 episodes, we've been looking at how most online scams these days are run by people living in slavery in Southeast Asia. We've been following the stories of 2 people who have been abducted and are trying to escape. And we're going to get to their escape. But first, I want to introduce you to the man who makes escape possible. His name is Tana, and he's an expert on scammer farms. He's probably one of the only experts on scammer farms. And he's going to help us to unpack their shadowy, blood-stained business model. Where did these things come from? Who owns them? And how does he help to get people out? Welcome to Scammerland. So in the last episode, we followed Small Q as he was tortured for refusing to work. But while that was happening, an SOS message that Q had sent via a stolen phone found its way to Judah. Hello, Judah. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So tell me about who you are.
My name is Judah. I originally came from Australia, and through, I guess, just life, I ended up moving to Thailand and living on the Thai-Burma border. And I've come to the day where human trafficking is just something that's in my life now as a daily occurrence, or anti-human trafficking work. And so, that's really where I'm at.
Judah hasn't always worked combating human trafficking. He actually went to a private school in Perth, and then he got into the corporate world. But then he decided to blow it all up, and he moved to Thailand.
I got to the point in 2006 where I thought about where I was at and where I really wanted to be. And I realized that I had become the, selfish Western Australian person that was really just about living for themselves. And I kind of forgot where I'd come from, and I had this identity crisis. I was going to give a year to somewhere that I loved. I always say that it was going back to my first love. It's like Thailand, the country and the people. And I grew up for many years knowing it and having friends here. And so I came in 2006, and that 1 year very quickly turned into 3, 5, 10. Now we're going on to 20 years.
Judah moved to the town of Mysot, which these days is just over the border from the largest concentration of scammer farms on the planet. But this was back in 2006, so the scammer farms hadn't yet been built. At that time, some of the region's biggest challenges were in education, so Judah set up an organization to help kids. It was called Global Advanced Projects, and Judah still runs it today.
Our mission, our aim was really to support children into schools and then into further studies, and also help with primary health care within communities. And it's been a fantastic kind of 2 decades.
But a few years ago, something started to change. And for Judah, the first indication was a whole lot of mysterious construction work over the border in Myanmar. He and his friends all talked about it, and no one had any answers until about mid-2022, when something unexpected happened.
One day we were just sitting, my family, and we had a friend over our house, and we're sitting around the dinner table, and my friend, she manages a Facebook account for our area for expats that want information, knowledge. They're not sure, where to buy something or how to get, transportation and things. And there was a young lady that was a Kenyan national that reached out on this Facebook group, and you kind of get used to seeing scams. We're all somewhat used to it somewhere in our lives. And so you read this, and this young lady had asked about a visa question. There were some things that she asked that really triggered a red flag in the situation. But my friend, so we said, okay, we'll just message her back and say, what's going on. And so there was this conversation that took place after that. And the young lady revealed that she was a victim of human trafficking, and she was trapped in Myanmar, and she needed $5,000 to get out. And I thought, for sure, she is a scam artist then, because, it's absurd. Now I need $5,000 to get out. I'm trapped.
Judah thought it was a ridiculous story, some new African prince type scam. So he told his friend, hey, why don't you ask for more information? Tell her that we're going to need some national ID numbers, maybe a passport number, date of birth, just everything that you can think of.
And I thought, okay, this scammer's going to run for the hills. And she started to answer every question. And I thought, gosh, there's got to be a 3% chance now that this is real. From there, we really asked, to find out if we could get pins for locations, those kind of things. And kind of asked her what it looked like. What was the scam center like? How were you trapped? What was your situation? And she was forthcoming with all the information. And we were able to then actually just take a drive.
Judah says that he drove to the top of a hill overlooking the Moy River into Myanmar. And he looked over at the area where this woman claimed that she was being held, and he saw that all of the construction was finished. And what stood there now was a cluster of 4-story buildings behind a huge wall. It kind of looked like a university campus, except that it was floodlit and eerily silent, and he couldn't see anyone moving outside.
And so we stood there and we saw these handful of buildings and we thought, how is this possible? How is it possible that there's somebody trapped? We discovered very quickly how real it really was, and just how many people were already involved, and the countries that had citizens trapped there, and the desperation that was happening. And we very quickly learned just how horrific the situation was.
Judah spent the next few weeks working with his local network and the Kenyan government to get this woman out. And it worked. They got her out. And from there, Judah's phone number got spread around inside the scammer farms.
I started to receive tens and then hundreds, and now into, hundreds, if not thousands of messages. And you very quickly got asked, help me, I'm from this country, I'm from that country. I learned so much about what was happening inside the compounds, how people were being brought in, where they were being brought in from, what was the technologies, all this kind of information, because the victims themselves were reaching out. And there was not that information available anywhere else in the world. So we became this, a place of a source of information to the world.
Remember, this was 2022, and the world was just recovering from COVID. While the world had been distracted, Chinese organized crime had thrown together these buildings and smuggled in all of these thousands of people to run scams. And Judah, living right next door, he was one of the first to realize what had happened. And so the world's governments, they turned to him for answers.
At that time, in all seriousness, nobody had a clue. Not us, and not any government agency in the world. As we started to reach out, we very quickly got connected with UNODC, who was doing major research on the scam compounds, and they knew nothing at all. So it's the group that were given the job, to really find out what was happening.
In that year, 2022, the UNODC, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, published the first major governmental report on scammer farms, which managed to piece together some information about where these things had come from.
There were previous acts like this in Cambodia and countries like that had scam centers similar to this, not to the same extent or size, but similarly to this in Cambodia, that they were shutting down or they were moving around. And so there was some information that you could gather from what had been in these other areas.
What I want to do now is give you a brief history on scammer farms. And it's going to be a bit incomplete because their origin, ownership, and financial structure, it's all murky by design. But here's what we do know thanks to people like Judah. It all started with COVID. When the pandemic hit, a lot of things shifted around. For one, millions of tourists and gamblers couldn't visit the hundreds of casinos set up along the Mekong Delta region. If you've ever traveled through Southeast Asia, you might have seen these really shady casino towns set up in so-called special economic zones, or SEZs. And these are places where tourists come to gamble, take drugs, hire sex workers, and they're largely owned by organized crime. But all the tourists disappeared in 2020, leading to a massive revenue drop for the casino owners. So they started looking around for new ways to make money. At the same time, the pandemic made a lot of people across Southeast Asia unemployed. Thousands of foreign workers, many of them previously involved in the gambling industry, they were laid off, which made them much more vulnerable to exploitation. But here's the clincher, and you might remember this. During lockdown, we all started buying stuff online. Digital payment systems, e-commerce companies, cryptocurrencies, they all boomed. You might remember that the price of Bitcoin went through the roof, and Asian crime groups realized that they could scam people by leveraging these technologies. Not just in Asia, but around the world. But it wasn't just about scamming people online. To run these operations, they needed workers. So they started offering young, educated, multilingual people, often from these really struggling areas, to come into these empty casinos to run scams. It's thought that this model first emerged in Singapore and the Philippines, but it wasn't long until a group in Taiwan had the bright idea of bringing in people to work, but then just not paying them. And really, it was slavery that made this industry explode. Taiwanese crime groups adopted slavery, and then the others followed. And from there, scamming became stupidly, irrepressibly lucrative. These days, the UN estimates that farm operators in Southeast Asia alone steal up to $36 billion annually, which is around the same turnover as the US oil giant Chevron. So imagine, Asian scammer farm operators now have the resources at the scale of an American oil company. That's where we are now. That's the scale of this thing. But when I asked Judah about who runs these scammer farms exactly, he was reluctant to give me a definitive answer.
So first of all, this Chinese crime organization, who's at the top of this pyramid? Who are these guys?
It's very hard to tell. So you're not talking about a scam center that's a single entity. You're talking about a group or collection of buildings that are built over, 100 acres. And within that fence line, there could be 40 companies operating. Each one of those companies have an investor. Each one of those companies are driven by different bosses. They have different protocols. They have different, focuses on which areas they're scamming, who they're scamming, how they're scamming. And their employees, the human trafficking victims, their employees, they are sold between the companies. So you've got companies within companies. When you trace them, you've got shell corporations, you've got dead ends, you've got, involvement. The idea is that they are untouchable and that they're untraceable. And truthfully, they're doing a great job at being able to stay in front of everything.
He's right. The industry's opaque management structure is by design. But still, we do know some loose things about who owns the scammer farms. For example, we know that KK Park was the first one to be built in Myanmar, and I've talked about this place in episode 2. It's actually the scammer farm that we feature on our podcast cover, and its origin story helps to illustrate how these places are bankrolled and managed. So according to a big investigation by the German state media company DW, the seed capital for KK Park came from a Chinese triad, which is a pretty notorious criminal organization. At the top is a guy named Wan Kwok Koi, also known as Broken Tooth. And this guy is a big deal in the Chinese underworld. But he's also involved in China's Belt and Road Initiative, or the BRI, which is this huge infrastructure effort to increase China's global footprint. Then the next party involved in KK Park's management is a medley of military groups in Myanmar. Now, the compound is in a region that's run by a military group that's kind of like the state government, and they're called the Karen National Union. And they run this area, this sort of state, with another group called the Karen National Liberation Army. And the leaders from these two groups, they actually attended the opening ceremony of KK Park in 2021. And then the third group, making money from KK Park, are just the individual businesses that sublet its buildings. Some of these are Chinese, some of these are originally from Taiwan or Hong Kong, and it's not totally clear if these interests are connected to the Chinese triads or if they're just operating in the same space. It's all very complicated, multi-layered, and deliberately murky. But it's indicative of Myanmar's scammer farm management structures just in general.
It sounds to me, this is wild speculation on my part, it sounds to me that they're being somewhat sanctioned by the Chinese government. The scale, the audacity of the thing makes it sound to me like if the Chinese Communist Party wanted to shut them down, I don't know, it just doesn't sound like a purely black market thing. It sounds a little bit gray market to me.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom, and I'm not in the position to be able to kind of answer those speculations. I do ask the same questions though. How is this
Yeah.
possible that it's running today? How is it possible? And so you've got China then that you would think would have some power because, of course, their people are investors. But they don't necessarily still live in China. So you've got Chinese investors that are in Singapore, in Taiwan, different places around the globe. And it's just this shuffling game. If you think about it kind of like that old, gambling game where you put a ball under the cups and the cups are moving and whatever, and you're trying to follow which cup has the ball and then it suddenly disappears. It's really one of those. While the world is trying to figure out what's going on, these crime groups are just shuffling the cards or moving the cups around, and they're very hard to follow.
As you might have noticed by now, Judah has an intimate knowledge of the inner workings of scammer farms. He really is one of the few people on the planet who knows the intricacies of this hidden world. But we're going to take a quick ad break here. And when we return, we're going to dig in even further with him as he describes how the farms are adapting and developing AI in terrifying new ways. Hey, welcome back. So we've been speaking with a man named Judah Tana, and he watched as the first scammer farms got built during COVID. And he knows more than almost anyone in the Western world about how they originated and how they operate. And he admitted to me that he's actually kind of in awe at the cold brilliance of their business model.
It's beyond, anything that we've seen before. And it's true. I stood with my colleagues, co-workers at the border one day, and my colleague says, is it wrong of me to be slightly awed at what they've managed to achieve in this amount of time? Is it wrong of me to be slightly impressed by their business model? And I said, it's the same. I'm the same. There is a point of me, this entrepreneurial Judah, that looks at this and says, it's absolute brilliance. It's the way that they've marketed it, the way that they've planned it, the way that they've moved into technologies, the way how they sophisticatedly built this when an entire world was closed down.
This is something else that keeps coming up as we've been investigating this story. Just how technologically advanced these scammer farms have become. I said in an earlier episode how each farm has a department of young women who get on the phones with their victims. Well, they can also get on FaceTime or on Zoom because the scammer farms have this custom AI technology that allows them to digitally wrap completely convincing looking faces over their models. So you might be on a call looking at a woman whose facial expressions seem completely natural and convincing, but actually you're just looking at a digital mask superimposed over the actual face of the person that you're speaking with. According to Judah, it's this kind of technology that's impressing even people who are working in AI.
Yeah, so there was a global summit earlier this year that was held in Taiwan that looked at the AI technologies. It had law enforcement from so many countries that came to listen to speakers and to dive into what was happening with AI. And one of the key points, the takeaways from this meeting, was that the technology is about 2 years more advanced inside the scam compound than any government agency in the world has. And what they did when they started this scam center, I mean, this is where you see the brilliance of their business mind. They started the scam centers by running these scam programs, like internet cafes. You go to work and you work within your little cubicle and you have your computer and you've got your phones and you're just connecting with people all over the world, whether using dating websites or whatever. On the other hand, they brought in and they focused on, in the beginning, in the first year of this, they brought in and they focused on those who had the right degrees. So we saw people that were PhD holders in IT. There were computer programmers. There was just everything that you can imagine that they needed, they went after. They brought these people in and then essentially they tortured them in order that they would work 17-hour days, developing AI softwares that were never seen before. I remember with one young lady that we helped get out of the scam compound. I mean, she was brought in and she had a PhD in computer engineering. And she said to me, I've never seen technologies like this ever in the world. We never studied anything like this, but yet I was asked to make something that didn't exist. And the compounds themselves gave her access to anything she wanted. Whatever she wanted, they could get in for her so that she could develop these AI technologies. So that today we see it, different agents, different news groups and stuff have reported on it. And you kind of hear, oh, well, there's this new technology that shows like, you could have a conversation with a robot, an AI, graphic, and you would never even know that they're AI. You wouldn't know that they're not real.
Hearing Judah say this makes me feel a bit hopeless. It's just the sheer scale and power of this industry, the way it's so untouchable, yet in plain sight. Scamming is really, really lucrative, and these shady organizations and military juntas, they're experiencing this period of fantasy wealth and freedom. They want some custom cutting-edge piece of AI technology, not a problem, they just get it built. Or they want some new complex of multi-story office buildings in a field, no worries, they can get that built too. Anything they want, they can do it. But actually, Judah was telling me that for some of the farms, all of this power seems to be going to their heads in kind of weird ways. And one of them is how they approach torture and punishment, and especially in the farm that Q got sent to.
They already had the most horrific forms of torture. It is becoming so much worse. There is no humanity left there. So where we saw it was beatings and tasers and black rooms and being strung up by your arms for days at a time, it was never enough. And it kind of went through this period of time where there was grown men would be spanked all day long until they were black and blue on their backsides. It became this almost sadistic fetish of the bosses that they had to punish them, and they were no longer being tasered or beaten, punched, bruised. They were being spanked on a daily basis until they were so black and blue. Also the females, not just the males. It took on this really like disturbing kind of almost fetish sexual fantasy, and then that led to the increase of sexual abuse and rape. And it's horrendous when a greater percentage of people that come out no longer just testify, and that's male and female, that no longer just testify to beatings or testify to, tasers, but testify to the fact that they have been raped while they are there. And it is now such a common occurrence inside that scum compound. So we saw what was abuse by more psychological, and then psychological went to just absolute physical trauma, which then went to this kind of sadistic level of fetish fantasy, and now moved into rape from their leaders. And it's horrendous. And if you can dream it up or think about it, or even the worst of the worst horror movies you've ever seen or thought of, they go far beyond that. It's just never enough. They're always looking for the next way in which they can make it worse for somebody.
It's so bizarre. When you're saying this, I'm thinking about like criminal profiling that I've read, like books by FBI criminal profilers who talk about how serial killers, their behaviors evolve as they kind of mature into their careers in homicide. It's got that kind of ring to it. Like, yeah, this isn't really doing it for me anymore. I'm going to try some rape. Like that sounds pretty flippant, but it's a bit like that.
Yeah, it is. And I've been so unfortunate to have witnessed even the murders that have taken place, because there are chat groups where those of us that are deeply within the investigation side of it, or deeply within the victim side of it and the criminology side of it, there are chat groups that go around where the leaders or the criminal bosses or those inflicting the crimes actually murder individuals and then post about it. They share the torture, they share the what happens to their victims, and then they share pictures of their dead body and they almost celebrate it. So it's exactly what you said. It's like the profiling, that it just gets worse and worse until they actually celebrate the torture in which they commit, and then they post it online. They post on these chat groups between other bosses of other companies in order to almost say like, meet me at this place or do me one better. how can you do the next one? And they joke about where they can bury the bodies and where nobody can find them and nobody cares.
That's just one example of the way these groups are becoming more depraved with time. But there's another. And just a heads up, dark rooms and black rooms, they're the same thing.
One of the victims that came out had asked me one day, did you hear about the red rooms? And I had not at that time. And he said it's a room where they actually put the deceased persons or the victims that have passed away into those rooms until their corpses rot. And then they lock people in those rooms with the either rotting corpses, or they remove the corpses and leave them. But there is the smell, the stench of that room. He said even when the door opens, you cannot stop yourself from vomiting. You cannot stop yourself from being physically ill just at the smell of those rooms. And they lock people in there for days.
God. How often are you seeing, so you're getting these people out, you're doing these extractions, how often are you seeing people sort of permanently disabled, or, like, is it quite frequently that people are really injured when they get out?
Everybody has their story and their injuries. A lot of the scam compounds actually don't let the victims out until after many of their injuries have healed in some way. So even if you paid a ransom of $5,000 US, $10,000 US, it's likely the compound will keep you for several weeks later until all your bruises settle, or your cuts close, or your marks from the handcuffs are much lessened before they actually let you out.
And that sort of brings us to a more positive note. Judah's main job these days is rescuing people from scammer farms. So here's where we're going to lay the foundations for how he helped to get both Small Q and Cattleya out. But I should flag, we're not going to go real deep on the details. Judah's ability to get people out kind of rests on his private relationships and his local knowledge, which he doesn't want to give up for obvious reasons.
So the rescues, you use the word rescue loosely sometimes. So often now the victims actually have to negotiate their own release. They're being asked to pay ransoms. So you're explaining that it's one of the only ways out. But then one of the problems is even if they pay the ransom, they're either not necessarily released. So that takes a negotiation to get them out, or they're released and unable to. They don't know where they're going. They don't know how to get out. And so you're trying to meet them at that place where then you can walk them through the process. Or they're sold to another compound. And that's really where we try to intervene in that moment of time between one compound and another. And that's really where the rescues, I think, take place.
Judah was pivotal in freeing both Small Q and Cattleya. In our next and final episode, we're going to come back to Q and his rescue. But for now, let's revisit Cattleya to learn how she got out and how she got home to her 9-year-old boy. That's after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. So you remember Cattleya, right? She was the Filipino mother from episode 2. And just like Q, she's been fighting for survival. She's been scamming all day, every day, and she's also faced violence and punishment. Although luckily, she never ended up in a dark room, but she was still desperate to escape.
I have to think, how can I get out? And I started to ask help for Thailand people because they're the one who got in and out in Myanmar with no problems.
The social order seems very defined in these compounds, and according to Cattleya, the Thais, they're the top dogs, second only to the Chinese.
Thailands are powerful in Myanmar. They are untouchable. And then I asked the one Thailand boy to help me. And then he said, there is no problem with the car. We have the contact. But the problem is the money. If you have the money, we can get the car.
What this Thai guy is saying is that if Cattleya can provide $1,000 USD, he'll get her driven out of the compound. And by some miracle, she did actually have $1,000. Remember, Cattleya was recruited under a very different process to Q. She was recruited by friends who were actually earning money. And initially, Cattleya was too, or at least for the first month, where she was paid in crypto. But then they stopped paying her as she became less obedient. So when this guy from Thailand asked for $1,000, Cattleya was actually able to pay. And then he promised to meet her at 8 a.m. the next morning, but warned her, don't be late.
And then the boss said, if you did not go out on the compound at 8 in the morning, you have two options. We will sell you or we will kill you. I only have two options. I didn't sleep, Julian.
Oh
Really?
my God. So you saying that they're like, you either need to get in that car and it's going to cost you $1,000 USD, or if this somehow doesn't work, we're going to kill you.
Or they will sell you on the other company.
You'll get sold into a different compound.
I mean, yes, different gate. And you don't know where they will sell it. So when I go out, one car was waiting for me outside. And that car is different from the picture they sent to me that will pick me up. So I got scared. And then I didn't understand them because they're talking Burmese and Thais. And then they told me that I will pass a river. That is the time that I got scared because I didn't pass the river, right? Yeah, then I think it's my time. I think I accepted it like maybe, okay, I will get killed. But I think it's my time. It's my time because I am very scared to hear the river. I really get scared. And then the driver of the car is not a Thai. It's the big boss of the military in the Burmese. He is the driver. And then I used the Google Translate. I told the driver, sir, I have a son. Please bring me to the river alive. Please don't kill me. I'm begging you. Then the Burmese military guy just laughed at me. Yeah, it's fine, he said.
Oh, God.
Yeah,
That's
like
so
it's
nerve-wracking.
normal.
Yeah. I won't kill you. Haha.
I said, don't kill me. Like it's a normal thing with them, right? Then we pass a river. The river is so small. Like 5 meters away. Yeah. And then when you pass the border, it was already Thailand. When I passed the river, one car was waiting on me on the other side and bring me on the hotel that Judah said to go. When I got there, really, I feel safe. When I saw Judah and Amy, I know I'm safe, you know?
Amy works with Judah at Global Advanced Projects, and they often do rescues together.
Can you tell me about that moment that you saw Judah?
So when I saw Judah and Amy, I feel excited. I'm so happy that someone was helping me. Like, I can talk English and someone will understand me. Like, you know. And then they explained everything to me. What will I do? What is the best option? What is everything? But when they heard my story that I passed the border, everything's changed.
What Cattleya is talking about is the way that she was driven across the Thai-Myanmar border in a van. Most people are trafficked into Myanmar via a boat, but Cattleya, she was just brazenly driven across the border. And this is important because it illustrates just how closely the border police and the scammer farms are working together and how corrupt they are. And Judah remembers hearing this story and just being shocked.
I just remember hearing her story and being wowed at her experience. I always have this saying, there's nothing new under the sun. So after 1,000 victims of human trafficking personally coming to me and me personally speaking to them, there is almost nothing new that a victim can tell me. And so when it doesn't sound the same or there's parts of it that are not, don't make sense, I usually will say to them, look, let's stop, kidding with each other. Let's actually get to the honest truth. I'm not here to prosecute you. I'm not here to, find out what you did or didn't do. I'm here to make sure that you have the best advocate possible and you are taken care of all the way until you are home. And it usually brings about a lot of truth. But with her, hearing her story, I questioned it. I really did. I pushed her. I was like, could this be real? And she stuck to her guns. And she just looked at me one day and I remember her saying, I have no reason to lie to you, which is why I'm not. And one of the unique parts of her trafficking story was that she was actually taken over a land bridge into Myanmar, which was just unlike anybody else's story.
I asked Cattleya how it felt to get back to the Philippines, stepping off the plane and knowing she was finally safe. And her answer kind of cracked me up.
I smoke cigarette when I step on this outside the plane because I feel like I need it.
Do you usually smoke?
Not much, but
Yeah.
when I get scared or nervous, I smoke. When I step out, when I smell the air of the Philippines, I know it's my country. And everything I know, everything I do, I know it's my country. And I know it's mine. And no one will harm me, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I'm home. I know I'm home. And even I'm tired for everything, I go straight 7 hours from Manila to my home. And I travel.
How was it? How was it seeing your boy?
He was crying. I am not crying. He was crying because he knew what is happening. But I don't want to see me crying because I know it's my fault. Like, I put myself on danger again. Like, I don't want to disappoint him again, you know. So I cried all the time, but they didn't see me crying.
No.
It was hard.
I think you'd be forgiven for crying. This is a completely reasonable time to cry.
Yeah. And in my heart, I don't feel sad, really, Julian, honestly. I am not sad on what happened on me on Myanmar. I think it is like an open door for me to pursue my dreams or my study. Like, it was an open door to continue what I learned, to help others, right? I finished helping people, like solving crimes, right? Maybe I can pursue that. Like,
Yeah.
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 You
that-
understand?
So
my point?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's still your dream. You wanna work in the police force or in some sort of
Like something like an FBI, like something
Yeah.
like that. Because no one understands or experience what I experienced in Myanmar, right?
So that is how Cattleya got out. And I'd just like to highlight that she really does want a job in law enforcement. She has a degree in criminology, and she's got some fairly unparalleled experience working inside these scammer farms. So if anyone listening could use those skills, please get in touch with us via Instagram or TikTok. Links are in our show notes. On the next and final episode of Scamland, we're going to follow Q as he finally gets out. Also, these farms aren't going away. They're getting bigger as more people fall victim to scams. So we're going to look at how the world is coming together to combat the industry. That's next week on Scammerland. Thanks for listening, and please follow. If you're enjoying this and you'd like to offer some support, the easiest thing that you can do is follow the show. Scammerland is produced by Rachel Tuffrey. Editing is by me, Rachel Tuffrey, and Jamie Snyder. It's mixed by Jimmy Saunders, who also did our sound design. Our cover art is by Rich Akers. Our interns are Nina Fussell and Ellie Dickey. And this whole thing has been a Superreal production.